And welcome to the UFC, to a fresh-faced 22-year-old Michael Morales representing Ecuador. He will become just the second Ecuadorian fighter in the UFC after Chito Marlon Vera, looking to make a big-time impact at welterweight, taking on Trevin Giles. The problem's the nickname, and the problem for Trevin Giles is the fact that this is his first ever fight at welterweight. Ever. Now, he looks great on Instagram. Physically, 100% he looks great. Which looks better, Matt? Trevin Giles making 170 on Instagram, or Michael Morales' ear after his last fight?
Probably the problem making 170.
Yeah, and it hasn't really looked like a problem, but I have to say that because in the UFC, he has experience at 205. And he took on James Boknovic. That was his UFC debut. Wins that fight, I'd say handily. It definitely was handily. And then if you go over it and through it and whatever you want to do, he's had some interesting fights, but I mean, you really get into it. The wins that he has lately, Roman Dolidze, who, when he's done trying to please Eric Nicksick when he's fighting, that's going to be when he starts winning more fights. And for Dolidze, he was just having too much fun, and then the pressure continued to mount from Giles. It was that power jab and the nice combinations that were able to win that fight for him. He fights Bavon Lewis and then just goes balls to the wall in the third round and knocks him out. And before that, James Krause. But I go into this and I look at all the fights, and I guess Boknovic really the only fight at 205, Zach Cummins, Gerald Mearshart, so on and so forth. It's just been a weird mixed bag for Trevin Giles inside the octagon, and I have to say this too. He has a nice fight of the night against James Krause, but other than Trevin Giles and everybody from Houston, I don't know who thought he won that fight.
Yeah, I thought James Krause had won that fight. Now, I know, again, Craig disagrees with the split decision. It's weird, everybody. But I do agree with you. I thought James Krause won that one. He had controlled Giles a lot on the mat. Now, Giles, as that fight progressed, the power punching was too much for James Krause, especially in the third round. But Krause did a really good job controlling Giles, especially in the first two rounds of his grappling. This is a way better fight than most of the other UFC debutants making their debut this weekend because, like, Trevin Giles isn't normally the type of fighter you'd be making your debut against. Giles isn't a borderline top 15 guy, but, like, I don't really see him as, oh, you're one fight away from being taken off the roster. Like, he really is a genuine threat to the middleweight division and now to the welterweight division. And here's the thing about Giles. I think he has a game to where if he can effectively cut weight down to 170, similar to what we've seen Kevin Holland do in the past. Like, Kevin Holland knocked out Jeff Neal outside the UFC at 170 pounds. A lot of people forget about that because Holland then fought at middleweight in the UFC and Neal stayed at 170. But I think Giles has a game to where if he can make 170 pounds safely, he's going to be a real problem at this weight division.
And if you go back through and look at it for Trevin Giles, 183.9, 184.5, now lately 185.5, but if you just look at him physically, he's not really a middleweight. Like, he's a guy that could definitely cut the weight to go to 170. Again, look at the Instagrams, looks great. Now we focus in on the prospect out of Ecuador in Michael Morales. I mean, what is there that I can't say? Like, I have so many nice things to say about him. Striking? Yeah, he can do it. Is he one of the longest guys in this division? 110% he is. And he used that length very well. And it was something that was accentuated by the commentary team when you watch just his fight on Contender Series. Where's his jab? Because in every other fight, he has a jab. He definitely has a jab. And the thing with Morales that can help him, not just in any UFC fight, but a fight against Trevin Giles. What does Giles do well? Controls distance, uses his jab, and is able to move in and out very well when he needs to. His fight against Bavon Lewis, he does exactly that, and he finishes him in the third round. And then you look at Giles' last fight when he takes on Dricus du Plessis, and he strikes like he's Andrew Sanchez. Like, this is the second thing that I'm doing, but I'm going to make it my first thing. And he dances in and out with his hands low, and he fights with a karate stance. And at one point, the point before he gets knocked out, he throws a nice 4 or 5 punch combo up against the fence and looks like, hey, this could be the beginning of the end for Dricus du Plessis until du Plessis fires a straight shot, drops Giles, and finishes him. So it really is tricky when you just focus on these two guys when it's a stand-up fight.
I think Giles is a big advantage just in the stand-up, if I'm being completely honest. Because this is the thing about Giles. We kind of saw it in last night's main event. If he could crowd Morales and turn this into a boxing fight, Giles shouldn't have many problems. Because, like you said, he's not just good at getting in and out of range. He's good at knowing when to get in and out of range. And I know he got caught getting in or moving in on du Plessis in his last one. But Dricus du Plessis is a former KSW champion. A former, like, legit middleweight, big middleweight with huge power. So losing to a guy like that, it doesn't completely diminish your stock in my eyes, at least. And the thing about Giles, too, is that if he can make 170, and let's say he looks great on Friday weighing in, I think he's going to be able to eat a shot a lot better at this weight class. And this will be the last thing. If he can get on the inside of Morales, I think he'll go to the body, go to the head, and land a ton of combinations. The thing about Morales, though, that I think is going to give Giles trouble is not only the jab, but it's the kicks, too. If he could keep Giles in the center of the cage and just keep on teeing off on him, jab, and then setting up his body kicks, setting up his leg kicks, he might be able to make Giles just a sitting duck for, like, the last 10 minutes of this fight. But again, I really do think distance management for both guys is going to be the key to this matchup.
Trevin Giles, this is the point that I want to hammer home. If you're following along, if you're going to tell your friends anything, Trevin Giles in his UFC fights, total, the most leg kicks he's ever thrown was against Zach Cummings. Guess how many he threw? 3. He threw 3 friggin' leg kicks. That's the most he's ever thrown in a UFC fight. His average for just straight up leg kicks in a fight is 4.125% of his total strikes. That's awful. Now, he wins fights, but that's awful. And it's because he's such a good boxer, and he can mix in the takedown, and he can defend takedowns. He has some of the best hips in this division. And the other thing that he does very well is controls body weight up top. We talked about this last week for Holmes and Pickett. Trevin Giles is another guy like Jamie Pickett that when he's backed up to the fence, he's very positionally aware to where he can turn his opponent around, where he can back out, and then we're back to striking. And for Giles, it's more we're back to boxing. But for Morales, if you watch him fight, very, very good with the leg kick on the inside of the knee to the calf. It just depends on the opponent. The other thing for Morales, he's a 3-time national wrestling champion, and I really like to see that, and a Muay Thai champion as well. Oh, yeah. And he's only 22 and he's 12-0. Now, level of competition, I told you I talk about it because for Valdez, he fought one of the similar opponents, and that's a scary thing. You look at his second to last fight for Morales, he fought Miguel Arizmendi, a guy who fought at lightweight, and then lightweight against our guy Valdez, then at welterweight against Morales, and then his next fight was at featherweight. So that guy, a little bit of a pad to the record. And then his last time out for Morales, he takes on Nikolai Vitatenikov, and in that fight, it was weird because that was a setup fight for Nikolai. He was supposed to win that fight. He was on Dana White's looking for a fight. Dana said, oh, no, we want you in Contender Series because you're too old. But now 30-year-olds get shots in the UFC. But Nikolai didn't. But when he fought Morales, first round was halfway competitive, and then Morales completely swept the rug out from under him, took him down multiple times. And to me, it was the scrambles and the awareness on the ground that really got it done. You talk about a guy that understands the body weight, especially when it's on the mat. Morales did exactly what you love to see out of a young prospect.
He has a great understanding of momentum to where if people are falling in a certain way, he'll just kind of go with the flow of their movement and end up in top position. This is my big point about this fight, though. I don't think Morales can take down Trevin Giles. I really don't. Maybe he can, but in my mind, if he can't do it, he is going to be screwed on the feet because Giles is so good at getting in and out of boxing distance that I don't think that's going to be a big problem for him in this matchup, and I don't think Morales has enough pure power to just make Giles pay for getting in and out of the pocket. So I always go back to, can Morales get Giles down to the mat? I think if he does, he's going to waste an awful lot of energy doing it to the point where I don't know how much he'll be able to progress into an offensive position from there. And if he can, Giles is very positionally aware on the mat. I know James Krause is able to have some success with him, but Krause is a legit grappler who is very, very tricky on the mat. So again, that doesn't completely diminish Giles' stock in my eye. I think this is going to be a phenomenal fight, though. I'm not going to lie. This isn't like the greatest pay-per-view top to bottom of all time in terms of depth, but for a guy making his debut against like a genuine talent in the UFC, this is as good of a fight as they could make.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it for Morales in his last fight, he did a suplex with about 10 seconds left in that one.
It was awesome.
Like a full suplex. You don't see that stuff very often, and I always like to watch these Contender Series guys when they win or when they get the contract, they're sitting down. Dana White's words were, I see signs of possible greatness. Like, sometimes he minces words, or sometimes it's like, yeah.
I said that about Uros Medic, too.
We were going to sign the guy anyway. Well, he had a really good debut against Ceylon Cruz. But still, for Morales, he is such a fun fighter to watch. Now, he opened a minus 155 favorite. He's a minus 145 now. For Giles, in the debut at 170, he opened a plus 135 underdog. He's plus 120. If we look over on Tapology, the votes have it 628 total votes. You have 60% for Morales. You have 40% for Giles. Majority have the fight to go to a decision. So that's it. The big question marks that I have here. I have keys. Morales pre-Dana White's Contender Series. Great jab. Trevin Giles, one of the best jabs in MMA. Then the other thing. Gas tanks. Both guys usually take their time, so it's going to depend on how Giles looks at 170, quite honestly. I mean, this is a guy at 185 that finished Brendan Allen and has a win over Ryan Spann. And that's not even in the UFC. That was outside of the UFC. So Giles had a great run. Now it's kind of been a mixed bag so far. I mean, again, Dricus du Plessis is a very good fighter, former champion from a giant organization of KSW, one-on-one with Roberto Soldic, who would mop the floor with some of these guys. But when I look at just this fight, it really is tough to call down the middle.
It is a tough fight to call, but you set it up perfectly. Just for me, if Giles looks like the same fighter at 170 that he did at 185, I think this is his fight to lose. I really do. I know he's the underdog, but I like his wrestling defense. I like his wrestling offense. And I think on the feet, he's at least steady enough to where he can put together combinations at any point during the fight, whether they are at open distance in the middle of the cage, or if he gets Morales up against the cage. And that really is the big key to it for me. If Giles gets Morales up right against the cage, he's going to unload on him with like 4, 5, 6 punch combinations. And those are really going to matter in this fight. If Morales gets Giles up against the cage, he's going to tee off on him, probably start breaking him down from legs up to the head, but I still think Giles is going to be able to counter off some of those, whereas Morales won't be able to counter off the attacks of Giles as much. So maybe even against my own better judgment, I do think Trevin Giles will be able to get it done.
To me, Morales is one of those guys that definitely understands his length. He's got pop at the end of his shots. Now, for Giles to back up Morales, he can back out, work the body, something that he does to great effect, where he misses out on leg kicks, he makes up for it in body work to tire out his opponents. Look at Roman Dolidze in their last fight.
He's got big muscles, though.
When I look at this one for Morales, I absolutely love that he has youth on his side, and I love his wrestling, even in a fight against a great wrestler. So I'm just interested to see what Giles looks like on Friday. That's going to be the determining factor for me making a pick on this one. But early on in the week, I do have Michael Morales here.
Yeah, I think this could be a great fight, but I do like Trevin Giles.
Split on the pick. Matt going with the hand where Tim Williams tried to put the city on the map. We're talking about Houston. He's going with Trevin Giles. I'm going with Ecuador's Michael Morales to get the win in his UFC debut. Let us know down below in the comments section who you have in this one. We have a stacked lineup of fights that you're not going to want to miss. Keep it locked in with Fight Name Picks. We always say, let's get into it.